We are very close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers, but I still need your support. Please don't forget to take a second and subscribe to my channel. The neon lights of the Mojave Desert bled into the night sky like a mirage, painting the horizon with shifting hues of pink and blue. 40 miles outside Las Vegas, along a stretch of highway that seemed to stretch endlessly into the desert, sat the Silver Stallion Casino, a relic of 1970s architecture with its gaudy horse-shaped marquee still galloping endlessly in glowing orange bulbs. It wasn't the kind of casino that made the postcards. Tourists bound for the Strip rarely stopped here, unless their gas tank was low or they couldn't resist the pull of cheap prime rib and $5 blackjack. For locals, however, the Silver Stallion was a familiar haunt, equal parts entertainment, community, and shadow. Truckers dropped in between long hauls, retirees fed the slot machines with their pensions, and the night shift dealers knew the regulars by name, drink, and secret debts. On October 19, 2007, at precisely 3:02 a.m., dealer Emily Hart clocked out of her shift. She was 29 years old, a single mother of one, and known among her co-workers as the most reliable employee on the floor. Her blackjack table was spotless, her chip counts always precise, and she had a reputation for remembering every face that passed through her section, no matter how forgettable the gambler thought themselves to be. Emily signed off at the pit boss's desk, tucked her uniform vest into her bag, and gave her usual wave to security guard Vince Morales as she crossed the lobby. Cameras showed her exiting through the employee entrance near the back parking lot, a door equipped with both a magnetic keycard and a mounted surveillance camera. The footage captured her stepping into the desert night, her long dark hair falling over her jacket collar, her stride brisk but not hurried. That was the last confirmed sighting of Emily Hart alive. The morning after, by 10:15 a.m., when Emily failed to show up at the elementary school where she volunteered in her son's classroom every Friday morning, her absence was immediately noted. Teachers called her cell phone. No answer. By noon, her sister Rachel, who lived 20 minutes away in Henderson, had driven by Emily's small apartment. The blinds were still drawn. Her car, a silver 2004 Honda Civic, sat in the assigned parking space, locked and untouched. Rachel knocked, then banged, then finally begged the apartment manager to open the door. Inside, the apartment was undisturbed. Dishes from the previous night's dinner sat drying on a rack. Emily's son's backpack lay on the couch, already packed with his math homework and a permission slip for a field trip. But Emily was gone. Her cell phone charger was still plugged in by the nightstand, the cord dangling uselessly. Her purse was missing, but her wallet was not, still sitting in the kitchen counter bowl where she habitually emptied it after work. By early evening, Rachel reported her sister missing to the Clark County Sheriff's Department. The casino's footage Detective Alan Briggs, a 14-year veteran with a reputation for quiet thoroughness, was assigned to the case. His first stop was the Silver Stallion security office. The casino prided itself on a 24-hour surveillance system, with over 150 cameras watching every inch of the floor, hallways, entrances, and parking lots. But when Briggs asked to review the tapes from the employee exit between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., he was met with an uncomfortable silence from a head of security, a man named Carl Jensen. "We had a technical issue," Jensen admitted, sweat beading along his hairline. "The drive that handles the West Wing feeds, where the employee exit is, that drive corrupted last night. We don't have footage." Briggs stared at him. "So you're telling me the only missing footage from the entire night is the exact 2-hour window when Emily Hart disappeared?" Jensen's nod was almost imperceptible. "We've had glitches before. The system's old. Outdated. But yeah, that's the gap." What Jensen didn't mention, but Briggs would soon discover, was that backup protocols, standard in casinos to prevent exactly this kind of glitch, had also failed. There were no redundant recordings, no cloud archive, nothing. The 2-hour block was gone. Erased. A reputation in the shadows, the Silver Stallion wasn't an ordinary casino. Its neon horse had galloped through decades of whispered rumors, mob ties in the late 70s, money laundering in the 80s, biker gangs running drugs through the parking lot in the 90s. Nothing was ever proven, but law enforcement kept one wary eye on the place. Emily herself had occasionally complained to friends about the clientele. "You can tell when someone sits at your table that they're not here for the cards," she told her sister Rachel in a phone call 2 weeks before her disappearance. "Sometimes they just watch you. Like they're studying." One regular, a man known only as Mr. D, always dressed in a gray suit and never played more than 2 hands an hour. Surveillance logs showed him seated at Emily's table the night she vanished. When investigators tried to track him, they discovered his player's card had been registered under a false address in Reno. His identity was a phantom. The locked car, Emily's Civic, parked outside her apartment, became a focal point. Detectives dusted it for prints, combed through its interior, and checked for signs of forced entry. Nothing. No fingerprints except Emily's and her son's. The gas tank was nearly full. The mileage indicated she had driven straight from the casino to her apartment, as usual. But neighbors reported never seeing the car pull in that night. How had Emily's car returned home without Emily? Early theories. Detective Briggs wrestled with possibilities. Voluntary disappearance? Unlikely. Emily adored her son, left money in her checking account untouched, and had made plans for the weekend with Rachel. Abduction from the casino lot? Plausible, but where was the footage? Why did the system fail at that exact moment? Staged disappearance? More sinister. Someone with access to casino security might have deliberately erased the evidence. By October 22, the case had already begun to draw whispers in Las Vegas media. Local news anchors asked the same question Briggs did: how does a woman vanish under the eye of 150 cameras in the middle of the desert? The first break on October 24. A maintenance worker cleaning the desert service road behind the casino found something half buried in the dust, a torn piece of fabric. Navy blue, consistent with the jacket Emily had been wearing. Stuck to it was a smear of what appeared to be dried blood. DNA results would later confirm it was Emily's. But where was the rest of her? Detective Alan Briggs sat at his desk in the Clark County Sheriff's Department, staring at the evidence bag that contained the torn scrap of navy blue fabric. The lab had confirmed the bloodstain matched Emily Hart's DNA, but the fragment's edges were jagged, as if ripped violently rather than cut. The desert sand embedded in its fibers suggested it had been outside for several days, exposed to wind and grit. If Emily had struggled with someone behind the Silver Stallion, why hadn't anyone seen or heard it? And why, Briggs kept asking himself, was the casino so conveniently blind during those crucial hours? Pressure from above. On October 25, 2007, Briggs was summoned to the office of Sheriff Daniel Haskins, a man whose political ambitions were no secret. Haskins closed the blinds. Before speaking, "This case is bad for business, Alan," he said, lighting a cigarette even though county policy banned smoking indoors. "The Silver Stallion pays a lot of taxes. They sponsor half the damn little league teams out here. If the public starts thinking one of their dealers vanished on property, it'll be a media circus." Briggs bristled. "Sir, it already is a circus. We've got local stations hounding us every morning. The Review-Journal is asking for comment. Emily's sister is calling 3 times a day. The casino's reputation isn't my priority. Finding Emily is." Haskins exhaled smoke through his nose, his eyes narrowing. "Just remember who signs your checks." It wasn't the first time Briggs had felt pressure to tread lightly around the stallion. Rumors about ownership ties to old Vegas crime families were persistent, even if unproven. What bothered him most was how quickly the casino's lawyers had arrived when Emily was reported missing, faster, it seemed, than the police. The sister Rachel Hart became the investigation's loudest voice. Blonde, sharp-tongued, and furious at the suggestion that Emily might have walked away voluntarily, she gave interviews to anyone who would listen. "My sister didn't run away," she told a Channel 8 reporter outside the courthouse steps. "She didn't leave her son, she didn't leave her job, she didn't just disappear for fun. Somebody took her. And the Silver Stallion knows more than they're saying." Her words ignited a storm. By Halloween, the missing dealer's face was plastered on billboards and flyers across Nevada. Casinos hated bad press, and smaller establishments like the Stallion were especially vulnerable. Briggs noticed the shift immediately. Security staff who had been evasive during his first interviews were suddenly cooperative, almost overly so, as if rehearsed. Surveillance glitch. Briggs requested an independent forensic audit of the Stallion's security system. The IT specialist, a wiry man named Chris Tarlow, spent 3 days combing through the drives. His conclusion chilled Briggs. "The footage wasn't corrupted," Tarlow said. "It was deleted. And not sloppily, either. Someone with administrator access scrubbed 2 hours of video and rewrote the logs to make it look like a system error." "Someone inside?" Briggs asked. Tarlow nodded. "Had to be. And they knew exactly which files to hit." That revelation changed everything. Emily's disappearance wasn't random. It was engineered. The dealer's life investigators turned their attention to Emily herself. By all accounts, she was diligent and organized, her life orbiting around her son Daniel, a shy 9-year-old who had now been taken in by Rachel. But in the weeks before her disappearance, co-workers noticed Emily had been distracted, even nervous. She kept checking over her shoulder, one cocktail waitress recalled. Like she thought someone was watching her. Briggs dug into her finances. Emily's checking account was modest but steady, her bills paid on time, her credit clean. Except for one oddity, 2 weeks before her disappearance, she deposited $4,000 in cash. Where had it come from? Mr. D, the mystery gambler in the gray suit, returned to Briggs's attention. Surveillance stills from the casino floor the night Emily vanished showed him seated at her blackjack table at 1:15 a.m. He barely played, his chips untouched for long stretches, his gaze fixed more on Emily than the cards. When detectives traced the player's card, they found nothing but a shell identity, prepaid phone numbers, P.O. box addresses, dead ends. Whoever he was, he had gone to lengths to conceal himself. Could he have been the one watching her? Rachel asked Briggs when shown the stills. Her voice trembled. She mentioned a man once. Said he made her skin crawl. I thought she was exaggerating. The desert search on November 3rd, a search party combed the desert scrubland surrounding the Silver Stallion. Volunteers from local churches, Emily's co-workers, and even off-duty cops joined the effort. They found nothing but the fragment of jacket already in evidence. Still, the desert was vast, unforgiving. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the dunes, Briggs realized that if Emily's body was out there, it could take years to find. A whisper in the dark, the first Rayall lead came not from evidence, but from rumor. A confidential informant told Briggs that the stallion had been laundering money through high roller games in a backroom, games where surveillance cameras mysteriously failed. Emily, meticulous and observant, might have noticed irregularities at her table. If she threatened to talk, the informant whispered, they'd make sure she never did. The son's memory, the most haunting clue, came from Emily's son Daniel. During a quiet conversation with a child psychologist, he mentioned something odd. Mommy said there was a man at work who smiled too much, he told the therapist. She said if anything ever happened to her, we should tell Uncle Alan. When Briggs heard this, his chest tightened. Emily had been afraid. Afraid enough to leave breadcrumbs for her son. But the question remained, who was the man with a smile that never reached his eyes? The case expands. By mid-November, the FBI had quietly entered the picture. Briggs received a call from Special Agent Julia Klein, who specialized in organized crime. You're not just looking at a missing dealer, she told him. You're poking at something bigger. Casinos like the Stallion don't erase footage for nothing. They erase it when the wrong people are watching. Briggs leaned back in his chair, the desert night pressing against his office window. Emily Hart's disappearance had begun as a single mother walking to her car after a shift. Now it threatened to expose a network of secrets that stretched far beyond one casino, into the heart of Nevada's underbelly. And somewhere, someone was watching him too. The Silver Stallion glittered against the Nevada desert, but for Detective Alan Briggs, every neon bulb now cast suspicion instead of glamour. He had worked missing persons before, runaways, drifters, lovers who vanished after fights, but this case was different. Emily Hart wasn't the type to disappear. Someone had made her vanish. And the casino's erasure of evidence only confirmed it. The FBI's entrant Special Agent Julia Klein arrived in Las Vegas on November 14, 2007. Sharp-featured, deliberate in her movements, and with a reputation for dismantling organized crime networks, she walked into Briggs's office carrying a case file 3 inches thick. We've been watching the Stallion for years, she said, flipping through surveillance photos. It's not big enough to attract strip tourists, but that's what makes it useful. Low visibility. Perfect for laundering and cash skimming. Briggs scanned the file. Wiretap transcripts, transaction anomalies, whispered names connected to old Vegas crime families. One stood out, Dominic Russo, a mid-level enforcer turned casino investor, known in whispers as Mr. D. You think he's our gray-suited phantom? Briggs asked. Klein nodded slowly. Fits the profile. He's careful, uses shell identities. And Emily? If she was sharp enough to notice patterns at her table, she might have seen something she shouldn't have. Emily's journal. Rachel Hart had been cleaning Emily's apartment when she discovered the small leather-bound notebook. At first, she thought it was just a planner. But between grocery lists and Daniel's school reminders, there were cryptic notes: gray suit again, 1:05 a.m. Dealer rotation changed last minute. Why? He's not gambling, just watching. Talk to Carl security, he brushed me off. Rachel handed it to Briggs with trembling fingers. She knew something. She was keeping track. The handwriting was precise, the entries dated meticulously. The last note, scrawled the day before she vanished, read, "Meeting tomorrow? Can't ignore this anymore." Meeting with who? The pit boss. Investigators returned to the casino, this time focusing on Rick D'Angelo, the pit boss who had supervised Emily's section. On paper, Rick was clean, 30 years in gaming, a spotless record, steady employment. But Briggs noticed inconsistencies in his statements. "You said Emily clocked out and left without incident," Briggs pressed during a second interview. "That's right," D'Angelo replied, eyes steady. Briggs slid Emily's notebook across the table. "Then why does she write that she spoke to you about a man who wouldn't stop watching her? Why does she say you brushed her off?" For the first time, D'Angelo's composure cracked. He glanced at the door, then back at Briggs. "You don't understand. People like him, you don't cross them. Not if you want to keep your job. Not if you want to keep breathing." A glimpse of fear. By the third week of November, whispers about Emily's disappearance were everywhere. Staff at the Stallion avoided eye contact when Briggs walked through. Some spoke in hushed tones about the girl who asked too many questions. One cocktail waitress, Maria Lopez, finally broke. She cornered Briggs in the parking lot after her shift, her voice trembling. "Emily wasn't supposed to deal to him," Maria whispered. "Mr. D. He requested her table. Always her. And the managers let him." Briggs's gut twisted. "Why?" Maria shook her head. "I don't know. But she told me once she felt like he was auditioning her. Like she was part of some test." The car mystery. The question of Emily's car still haunted the investigation. The Civic had been in its usual spot outside her apartment, yet no one had seen it arrive. A break came when Agent Klein tracked down traffic camera logs from the interstate near Henderson. At 3:47 a.m., 45 minutes after Emily left the casino, a silver Civic matching hers was captured on camera. The driver's face was obscured, but the silhouette was broader male. Whoever drove Emily's car home wasn't Emily. Financial shadows. Emily's unexplained $4,000 deposit was finally traced. The bill's serial numbers matched currency known to circulate through the Stallion's high roller games. The money was dirty. "Looks like a payoff," Klein said grimly. "Either hush money or bait." Rachel shook her head when told. Emily wouldn't take bribes. But maybe she thought it was evidence. Proof something illegal was happening. Dead ends and false leads. Tips flooded in. A trucker swore he saw a woman matching Emily's description hitchhiking outside Barstow. A motel clerk in Pahrump insisted she checked in under a fake name. Each lead fizzled. Each dead end drained resources and patience. Briggs felt the weight of failure. The desert swallowed secrets, and every day that passed made it less likely Emily would be found alive. The second scrap. On November 29th, nearly 6 weeks after Emily vanished, a hiker stumbled upon another fragment of fabric deep in the desert brush, 5 miles from the casino. This one was larger, clearly torn from a sleeve, with a button still attached. The desert winds had preserved it in a hollow between rocks. Stains across the cuff suggested it had been dragged, snagged, torn away. The lab confirmed it: Emily's jacket. The silent watcher. That same week, Briggs received an anonymous phone call at his office. The voice was male, raspy, disguised by a cheap voice modulator. "Stop digging," the caller warned. "The girl's gone. You keep pushing, and more people disappear." Then the line went dead. Briggs sat in silence, the dial tone echoing like a taunt. Closing in. Agent Klein pressed for warrants, but casino lawyers stonewalled at every turn. Surveillance files were lost. Employee schedules were misfiled. But one fact was becoming unavoidable: Emily hadn't been the victim of random violence. She'd been targeted, silenced, and erased by people who understood the art of making someone vanish in plain sight. For Briggs, the question had shifted. It wasn't just what happened to Emily Hart. It was who inside the Silver Stallion had helped cover it up, and why. The Silver Stallion's neon horse galloped endlessly into the desert sky, but by December 2007 its glow no longer promised fortune, it whispered menace. Detective Alan Briggs knew that every night Emily Hart remained missing, the chance of finding her alive slipped further away. Yet every scrap of evidence, every whisper from inside the casino, convinced him she hadn't simply vanished. She had been silenced. Federal pressure on December 3rd, Special Agent Julia Klein stormed into Briggs's office with a folder stamped confidential. She dropped it on his desk. "We finally got approval for Title III intercepts," she said. "Wiretaps on Dominic Russo's burner phones. If Mr. D is involved, we'll hear it." Briggs flipped through the paperwork. The FBI's organized crime unit had been circling Russo for years, suspected ties to loan sharking, extortion, and backroom gaming operations, but they'd never pinned anything concrete. Emily's disappearance had given them an angle. "Russo's smart," Klein warned. "He won't say Emily's name. But if he ordered this, someone in his crew will slip." The casino lawyer that same week, Briggs received an unexpected visitor. Anthony Gallo, the Silver Stallion's attorney, arrived unannounced, his silk tie knotted perfectly, his briefcase gleaming. "Detective Briggs," Gallo said smoothly, "the Stallion has nothing but respect for your investigation. But my client is concerned about the perception that this establishment is under attack. Bad for business. Bad for the county." Briggs leaned back in his chair. "Your casino erased surveillance footage. That's not perception. That's obstruction." Gallo smiled thinly. "Our IT logs indicate a system malfunction. If you have evidence otherwise, present it in court. Until then, I'd advise against inflammatory accusations. People's livelihoods are at stake." The message was clear: back off. Rachel's anguish. Meanwhile, Rachel Hart refused to stay quiet. She organized candlelight vigils, pleaded on local television, and called out the casino by name. "Somebody there knows what happened to my sister," she said during a December 7th rally. "And until Emily is found, none of us are safe." Her voice shook, but her eyes blazed. The crowd erupted in applause, but behind the applause was fear. In small Nevada towns, you didn't challenge people like Dominic Russo. The pit boss breaks under federal protection. Pit boss Rick D'Angelo finally admitted more than he had before. Russo ran private games upstairs, he confessed. Unmarked rooms, high stakes, no cameras. Emily wasn't supposed to see them, but one night she wandered too close. After that, he insisted she deal his table. Briggs asked the question that had haunted him for weeks. Did she confront him? D'Angelo nodded miserably. "She told me she was going to HR. Said she'd seen things that didn't add up, cash swaps, marked chips. I told her to keep her head down." Next night, she was gone. The wiretap on December 12th, the FBI caught a break. A wiretap picked up Russo speaking to an associate named Leo Martelli, a low-level enforcer. "She's not coming back," Russo's voice said, flat and cold. "The desert keeps its secrets. Tell the boys to shut their mouths." Klein replayed the tape for Briggs. His stomach clenched. Russo hadn't named Emily, but the implication was undeniable. "We've got him," Klein said. "Now we need a body." A disturbing discovery 2 days later, search teams expanded their grid south of the casino. At dusk, a deputy stumbled upon a shallow depression in the sand, covered by scrub brush. Inside were burned remnants, women's shoes charred beyond recognition, and metal clasps from what might once have been a purse. The fire hadn't destroyed everything. Among the ashes, technicians recovered a half-melted plastic ID badge, Silver Stallion employee access card. Name, Emily Hart. The casino's retaliation that night: Briggs's unmarked sedan was vandalized outside his home. Windows smashed, tires slashed, a dead desert jackrabbit stuffed into the driver's seat. The message was clear. He was being watched. The son's nightmare. Meanwhile, Daniel Hart began waking from nightmares, screaming that the man in the gray suit was outside the window. Rachel reassured him, but deep down, she feared he wasn't just dreaming. Briggs arranged for federal protection, but the boy's words echoed in his head. How could Daniel have known about the gray suit unless Emily had prepared him? The turning point by late December, the case had reached a boiling point. Briggs and Klein had fragments of fabric, ashes of belongings, a wiretap hinting at guilt. But no body. Without it, prosecutors feared the case would collapse in court. On December 29th, a tip came from an unlikely source. A janitor at the Stallion, nervous and pale, requested to speak confidentially. He claimed that on the night Emily vanished, he'd been ordered to clean the north service elevator at 4 a.m. inside. He'd found streaks of what looked like blood. Before he could report it, a supervisor told him to forget it ever happened. Briggs's pulse quickened. The casino hadn't just erased tapes. They'd cleaned crime scenes. End of the year as 2007 closed, Las Vegas rang in the new year with fireworks over the Strip. But for the Hart family, the night was hollow. Emily's chair remained empty at the dinner table, her son's drawings of her taped desperately to the refrigerator door. Detective Briggs stood at the edge of the desert that night, the cold wind carrying the smell of dust and sagebrush. Somewhere out there, beneath miles of sand, lay the truth. And he swore he would not stop until he dragged it into the light. The first days of January 2008 dawned cold and gray across the Nevada desert, though the Strip glittered with its usual excess. For Detective Alan Briggs, the new year meant nothing but time slipping further away. 3 months had passed since Emily Hart vanished from the Silver Stallion Casino. 3 months of fragments, rumors, erased footage, and whispered threats. Yet still, no body. The janitor's story. The janitor who had come forward about the North Service elevator agreed to a formal interview under federal witness protection. His name was Luis Ortega, a quiet man in his late 40s with decades of cleaning work behind him. They told me to mop it, bleach it, Ortega said, wringing his hands. But it wasn't a spill. I know blood when I see it. It was smeared along the floor, like something heavy had been dragged. And the smell metal, strong. Klein leaned forward. Who told you to clean it? Ortega hesitated. Supervisor named Grant. He's been Russo's shadow for years. Always looks the other way. The statement gave Briggs chills. If Emily's blood had been in that elevator, it meant she hadn't disappeared outside. She had been taken deeper into the casino before vanishing. The casino's blueprint using a subpoena, the FBI obtained blueprints of the Silver Stallion's original 1970s construction. Hidden in the diagrams were service corridors and storage rooms that weren't accessible to the public, some never updated in modern renovations. One room in particular caught Briggs's eye, Subbasement C, a storage area beneath the north wing, directly connected to the service elevator Ortega described. Half the staff doesn't even know it exists, Klein said grimly. If she was brought there, surveillance would never catch it. Rachel's fury. Rachel Hart became a permanent fixture in the sheriff's lobby, demanding updates. On January 7th, she slammed Emily's journal onto Briggs's desk. Look at this entry, she snapped. She wrote, North exit feels wrong. She must have sensed something. Briggs studied the page, the handwriting tight, hurried. Rachel's eyes brimmed with tears. Don't tell me she's gone, detective. Find her. Please. Briggs swallowed hard. He'd seen families beg before, but Rachel's desperation carved into him. He felt her sister's absence like a living wound. The wiretap break on January 10th, the FBI's wiretaps delivered their most damning evidence yet. Dominic Russo, speaking to Leo Martelli, said, Grant handled it. The girl's gone. Nothing left but dust. If they dig, make sure they hit sand, not bones. The agents exchanged looks. Russo had incriminated himself without realizing it. The reference to Grant matched Ortega's testimony. The reference to bones confirmed what Briggs feared: Emily was dead. A shadowed history digging into the Stallion's archives, Briggs discovered a disturbing pattern. 3 other employees over the past decade had left suddenly under personal reasons. Each departure coincided with whispered rumors of surveillance tampering. 1998, a cashier who questioned chip counts vanished to Arizona, never heard from again. 2002, a cocktail waitress reportedly quit, but left all belongings behind in her apartment. 2005, a security guard transferred to Reno overnight, with no forwarding address. None were investigated at the time. But the pattern was unmistakable. Emily's disappearance wasn't the first. She was just the first to draw this much attention. The poker player on January 15th, Briggs tracked down a gambler named Victor Lamb, a semi-professional poker player who had spent that October night at the Stallion. Lamb admitted he'd been in the high-limit room until after 3 a.m. I saw Russo leave through the north exit, Lamb recalled. Wasn't alone. Couple of guys with him. One of them was carrying a bag. Big one. Like duffel size. He didn't want anyone to notice, but I notice everything. Briggs pressed him for more, but Lamb shook his head. That's all. But the way Russo looked? Like he was daring anyone to ask. The Sun speaks again. Daniel Hart, now withdrawn and quiet, surprised everyone during a therapy session. Mommy said if I couldn't see her anymore, to tell Rachel about the horse, he whispered. Rachel's heart nearly broke. What horse, sweetie? Daniel shrugged. She just said, the horse always runs, even when you can't. Briggs felt a chill. The Silver Stallion's neon horse. Emily had left a warning hidden in her son's memory. She knew the casino was dangerous. She knew it might take her. Preparing the raid with witness testimony, wiretap evidence, and mounting pressure, the FBI began drafting a search warrant for the Silver Stallion subbasements. It won't be easy, Klein warned. Briggs. We need airtight cause. The Stallion has lawyers who'll fight every inch. But if there's anything left of Emily down there, this is our only chance. Briggs nodded, though his gut twisted. He'd seen raids before. They didn't always end clean. If Russo felt the walls closing in, he might eliminate loose ends, including witnesses like Ortega, D'Angelo, or even Rachel. A final warning on January 20th. Briggs returned home to find a white envelope taped to his door. Inside was a single playing card, the Queen of Hearts, smeared with a dark red stain. On the back, scrawled in sharp ink, were 4 words, "Stop. She's already gone." Briggs stared at it for a long time, the desert night pressing in around him. Whoever left the card had been close enough to his home to know where he lived, close enough to stand on his porch unnoticed. The message wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Someone was watching every move he made. The Silver Stallion's neon horse flickered against the desert horizon like a taunt. To the casual traveler, it was nothing more than a roadside casino. But to Detective Alan Briggs, it had become a mausoleum hiding the truth about Emily Hart. The federal stalemate on January 23, 2008, the FBI's request for a full raid was delayed by a federal judge. The Stallion's lawyers argued there wasn't sufficient probable cause for such a drastic action. Wiretap hints and missing footage weren't enough. They'll bury us in paperwork, Agent Julia Klein muttered, slamming the phone down. Meanwhile, if Emily's down there, every day that passes makes it harder to prove. Briggs clenched his fists. We can't wait for them to hand us a warrant wrapped in ribbon. We need leverage. The fear inside casino employees began to crack under the pressure. Anonymous tips came in, voices hushed, terrified. One bartender admitted he'd seen Russo slip into the North Service elevator around 3 a.m. the night Emily vanished. A dealer confessed that employees had been warned not to talk to cops if they wanted to keep working or breathing. A cocktail server whispered that she had overheard Russo saying she thought she was smarter than the house. Each new testimony deepened the sense of rot at the Stallion. But none of it was enough for a judge. Rachel's breaking point. Rachel Hart's anger boiled into desperation. On January 25th, she marched into Briggs's office clutching Emily's photograph. My sister didn't just vanish into thin air, she said, her voice shaking with fury. And if the FBI won't tear that place apart, I will. Briggs tried to calm her. Rachel, don't, but she cut him off. I don't care if it kills me. They already took Emily. I'm not letting them get away with it. Briggs watched her leave, terrified she might actually try. Sub-basement C. Late that night, Briggs convinced Klein to join him for an unofficial reconnaissance. Wearing plain clothes, they entered the casino under the pretense of a routine compliance check. When they reached the service corridors, Briggs felt the weight of silence pressing in. The walls smelled faintly of bleach. The north elevator groaned as it descended. Sub-basement C was exactly as the blueprints showed: concrete walls, dim lighting, and storage rooms lined with old slot machines covered in dust. But in the far corner, Briggs noticed something out of place: fresh paint on the floor, a patch darker than the surrounding concrete. Klein crouched, running a gloved finger along the edge. Beneath the paint was a faint reddish smear. Blood, she whispered. The Whisper Network word spread quickly after their discovery. By January 28, 3 different employees reached out through intermediaries, each confirming that Emily had been seen arguing with Russo days before she vanished. She told him she wasn't scared, one said. Said she'd go to the State Gaming Commission if she had to. Another recalled Russo's response, "People who don't fear me don't last long." The wiretap slip on February 1, a breakthrough. The FBI wiretap caught Russo mid-conversation with Leo Martelli again. "You hear Briggs is still sniffing?" Russo growled. "That cop doesn't know the desert eats everything. She's 50 miles gone by now." Briggs's chest tightened. 50 miles. Was it bravado, or a breadcrumb? The ghosts of the past. As Briggs dug deeper into the stallion's history, he found disturbing parallels. In 1981, a cocktail waitress named Janice Miller had been rumored to vanish after confronting management about skimming. In 1992, a janitor disappeared after reporting suspicious cash drops. Neither case had been solved. The stallion had been swallowing people for decades. Emily was only the latest. The Sun's drawing Daniel Hart, still reeling from his mother's absence, drew a picture in therapy, a tall man in a gray suit standing beside a large box. Inside the box was a stick figure with long hair. When the therapist asked who it was, Daniel said, "That's Mommy." She said the man kept her in the dark before she went away. Rachel wept when Briggs showed her the drawing. She must have told him something. She knew. Escalation on February 5. Briggs's phone rang at 2:14 a.m. A distorted voice rasped, "You want to find her? Check the place where the horse doesn't run." The line went dead. Briggs replayed the words in his mind. The Silver Stallion's neon horse galloped endlessly outside, but one side of the sign had been broken for months. Locals called it the dead side. Could that be the clue? A map in the dust. 2 days later, search teams returned to the desert. Following the tip, Briggs ordered them to grid the stretch of scrubland directly beneath the broken side of the neon horse's sign. After hours of sifting through dust and rock, a deputy called out. They had found a buried plastic tarp. Inside it were fragments of fabric, consistent with Emily's uniform vest, and the rusted remains of a metal bracelet her sister confirmed had been Emily's. The evidence wasn't a body, but it was proof she hadn't left willingly. The walls close in with mounting testimony, wiretap slips, and the new tarp discovery, pressure on the FBI to act intensified. "Russo's starting to feel it," Klein told Briggs. "He's paranoid, angry. That's when men like him make mistakes." Briggs nodded grimly. "Then we wait. And when he slips, we're there." But waiting was dangerous. For every move Briggs made, Russo seemed to anticipate. Every night the neon horse flickered outside the Silver Stallion. It felt like a warning. Somewhere in the desert, Emily Hart's voice was still echoing. And Briggs feared it might take more blood before anyone listened. By mid-February 2008, the desert winds carried more than sand. They carried whispers. Whispers of a dealer who had seen too much, of tapes that didn't fail but were destroyed, of a man in a gray suit who never gambled but always watched. Detective Alan Briggs felt the pressure mounting with every sunrise. Emily Hart's absence had grown from a family's tragedy into a federal obsession. And still, the Silver Stallion stood untouched, its neon horse galloping endlessly against the Nevada night. The informant's panic on February 12, Luis Ortega, the janitor who had spoken of blood in the service elevator, was found unconscious in a Henderson alley. His jaw was broken, ribs fractured, wallet untouched. "Message job," Briggs muttered at the hospital bedside. When Ortega regained consciousness, he refused to testify further. "I have kids," he whispered hoarsely. "I can't. Please, detective. Drop it." Briggs knew he wouldn't drop it. But it meant one less witness. The broken neon. Briggs couldn't shake the anonymous warning. "Check the place where the horse doesn't run." On February 14, exactly 4 months since Emily vanished, he visited the Silver Stallion's giant sign. The neon horse, over 40 feet tall, galloped endlessly in flashing bulbs. But on its left flank, a panel of lights was permanently dark. Maintenance logs claimed electrical faults. Beneath the sign lay an abandoned utility shed, long sealed off. With a crowbar, Briggs forced it open. Inside, he found only dust, rat droppings, and a single poker chip wedged between floorboards. It wasn't an ordinary chip. Its paint was scratched, its serial number filed off. A chip meant to move untraceable money. Emily had been right. Someone was cheating the house. Rachel's desperation that night. Rachel Hart appeared at Briggs's doorstep, her face pale from exhaustion. Daniel woke up screaming again, she said, clutching Emily's journal. He said the man in the gray suit was standing at the window. Briggs scanned the quiet suburban street. Nothing. No headlights, no footsteps. Just the empty desert silence. But he felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. The FBI's patience runs thin. Special Agent Julia Klein called an emergency meeting on February 18th. "We're done waiting," she announced. "Between the wiretap, the TARP, and the intimidation of witnesses, we have enough for a raid. If the judge won't give us Subbasement C, we hit them for financials. Tax evasion. Skim operations. Something will shake loose." Briggs nodded, though he knew financial charges wouldn't bring Emily home. Still, pressure was pressure. Russo would feel the walls closing in. The pit boss vanishes on February 20th. Rick D'Angelo, the pit boss who had first confessed Russo's involvement, failed to show up for work. His apartment door was ajar, his wallet and keys on the counter. His car sat untouched outside. Inside the kitchen sink, detectives found a single playing card, the King of Spades, its edges wet with fresh blood. D'Angelo had become another ghost. The wiretap cracked the next day. The FBI captured Russo again on the wire. His voice was low, angry. Grant screwed up. He left traces. If they find the vest, they'll keep digging. Move everything before Friday. And make sure Briggs doesn't see his next sunrise. Klein looked at Briggs grimly as the tape played. "That's a direct threat on your life." Briggs shrugged. "Means we're close." But deep down, he felt the chill. Russo's men weren't bluffing. The desert discovery on February 23rd, a pair of hikers stumbled across something in the desert 10 miles south of the casino, a half-buried steel drum. Deputies hauled it to the lab. Inside were charred papers, melted plastic, and bone fragments too small to immediately identify. Forensic technicians worked through the night. By dawn, they confirmed, human remains. Female. The DNA was degraded, but preliminary tests suggested a match to Emily Hart. Rachel collapsed when Briggs delivered the news. Daniel clutched her hand silently, too young to fully understand but old enough to feel the weight of grief. Briggs targeted 2 nights later. Briggs left the sheriff's office after midnight. As he walked toward his car, he noticed something strange. The headlights of a parked SUV flickered on, though no one sat behind the wheel. Instinct saved him. He dove behind a pillar just as the SUV exploded, flames lighting the desert sky. Shrapnel rained down, alarms blared, and Briggs lay on the ground, ears ringing. Someone had tried to end the investigation with fire. The turning tide. The failed attempt only hardened Briggs's resolve. "They just made their biggest mistake," he told Klein. "Now we hit them harder." By the end of February, the FBI prepared simultaneous warrants, one targeting Subbasement C, the other freezing the Stallion's assets. The noose around Russo's empire was tightening. But Briggs knew men like Russo didn't surrender quietly. They burned everything on the way down. By March 2008, the Silver Stallion had become more fortress than casino. Plainclothes agents blended with gamblers, surveillance vans idled along desert roads, and Detective Alan Briggs lived under federal watch after surviving the car bombing. But the neon horse still galloped in the night, defiant, mocking. The raid was coming. The green light on March 5th, a federal judge finally signed the warrant. Subbasement C, financial records, all of it. The FBI and Clark County Sheriff's Department would move in simultaneously. Russo won't go quietly, Special Agent Julia Klein warned at the pre-raid briefing. Expect resistance. And remember, our primary goal is evidence. If we find Emily's remains, that's the nail in the coffin. Briggs clenched his jaw. We'll find her. The raid at 3 a.m. on March 7th, the Silver Stallion was hit from all sides. Federal agents stormed through employee entrances, while sheriff's deputies locked down the parking lot. Gamblers froze mid-spin as tactical teams swept the gaming floor. Shouts echoed through the hallways. Briggs and Klein led the team into the North Service elevator. The air was damp, metallic. When the doors slid open onto Subbasement C, the stench hit them first, bleach layered over something older, something rotten. The room stretched in shadows. Rows of broken slot machines and rusted chairs gathered dust. But in the far corner, hidden behind stacked crates, agents uncovered a heavy steel door secured with a modern electronic lock. "This wasn't on the blueprints," Briggs muttered. The locked room technicians bypassed the lock within minutes. The door creaked open to reveal a chamber lined with concrete walls. Inside were items catalogued with eerie precision: a navy blue jacket sleeve, torn at the cuff, a silver bracelet, bent and scorched, several photographs of Emily Hart at her blackjack table, taken from angles no surveillance camera could explain. And in the center of the room, a stained mattress, its surface dark with old blood. Rachel Hart's worst fears had been realized. Emily had been held here. The panic upstairs while evidence techs swarmed subbasement C. Chaos erupted on the casino floor. Dominic Russo, in his signature gray suit, was escorted from a high-limit lounge in handcuffs. He said nothing, but his smirk chilled Briggs more than any outburst could have. "You'll never make it stick," Russo muttered as agents pushed him past. "She's dust in the desert." The ledger amid the raid, one discovery stood out. Inside Russo's office safe was a leather-bound ledger, filled with coded transactions. Laundered money, off-the-record chip exchanges, and most hauntingly, a section labeled Problems. Under October 2007, one entry was scrawled in red ink: Hart, dealt with. Rachel's grief when Rachel saw the evidence photos. She collapsed in Klein's arms. She was there, all this time. While they gambled, while they laughed, she was down there. Her sobs filled the sterile briefing room. Briggs turned away, jaw tight. Detectives weren't supposed to cry. But that night, he did. The desert grave on March 12th, forensic teams confirmed the bone fragments found in the steel drum south of the casino belonged to Emily Hart. Her remains had been burned, scattered, discarded like trash. The DNA match ended the search, but not the pain. Rachel fainted when she heard. Daniel wept quietly, clutching his aunt's hand, whispering, "I knew she was gone." Retaliation. The stallion raid should have ended things. Instead, it escalated them. 2 days later, a federal witness set to testify about the casino skimming was gunned down outside his Henderson home. Briggs received another envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a joker card, its edges soaked in gasoline. The message was clear: burn or be burned. The net tightens despite threats. Prosecutors moved quickly. Russo was charged with racketeering, obstruction, and suspected homicide. But without a full confession, Emily's murder remained circumstantial. Klein pushed Briggs to step back for his safety. He refused. "This isn't just about Emily anymore," he said. "This is about every ghost that place swallowed." The smirk. On March 20th, Briggs visited Russo in holding. "Why Emily?" he demanded. "She was just a dealer." Russo leaned forward, his gray eyes cold. "Because she looked too close. Because she wrote it down. And because in this town, detective, curiosity doesn't pay." Then he smiled. The same smile Rachel had described. The same smile Emily had feared. Briggs left the room trembling with rage. He had proof, yes. But he wanted more. He wanted Russo to break. The last card that night, Briggs returned home to find a single playing card slid under his door. The Ace of Diamonds. On its back were 5 words written in neat block letters: "The house always wins." Spring 2008 arrived in Nevada with winds that carried both sand and secrets. The Silver Stallion still lit up the desert highway, but its glow had dimmed under the weight of federal seizure notices and boarded-up entrances. Dominic Russo, the casino's phantom king, now sat in county lockup, yet his influence reached beyond concrete walls. Detective Alan Briggs knew the case wasn't over. Arresting Russo was one thing. Convicting him for Emily Hart's murder was another. The trial of shadows. On April 4th, pre-trial hearings began. Prosecutors stacked charges: racketeering, tax fraud, evidence tampering, conspiracy. Emily Hart's murder hovered over every proceeding, but without a direct confession or an eyewitness, Russo's lawyers hammered at the gaps. "There is no body," Anthony Gallo, Russo's defense attorney, declared. "There is no murder weapon. There is no witness who saw Dominic Russo harm Emily Hart." Briggs sat in the gallery, fists clenched. The ledger, the blood in subbasement C, the burned remains, all of it pointed to Russo. Yet the defense painted them as circumstantial, a puzzle without edges. Witnesses silenced 3 days before testimony. Bartender Luis Ortega disappeared from witness protection. His safe house was found ransacked, his bed unmade, his cell phone crushed beneath his mattress. He was never seen again. On April 11th, another witness, cocktail server Maria Lopez, recanted on the stand, her eyes hollow. "I must have misremembered," she whispered, hands trembling. Briggs saw the truth. Fear was silencing them one by one. The survivor, only pit boss Rick D'Angelo, remained missing. The King of Spades card left in his apartment still haunted Briggs. Then, in mid-April, hikers discovered a shallow grave 20 miles outside Henderson. Inside lay D'Angelo's body, shot twice in the chest. His death certificate read homicide. His silence was permanent. Rachel's resolve Rachel Hart refused to break. She attended every hearing, clutching Emily's journal in her lap. During recess, she confronted Gallo outside the courthouse. "You think you can bury her with paperwork?" she spat. "My sister's blood is in that basement. You can't scrub it away." For a moment, even the polished lawyer faltered. The FBI's Gambit Special Agent Julia Klein pushed for a different strategy. "We stop aiming for murder," she told Briggs. "We use financials, fraud, extortion. We dismantle Russo's empire brick by brick. Once his men start turning on him, we circle back to Emily." Briggs hated it. "So Emily's case becomes leverage?" Klein met his glare. "Emily's case becomes justice. It just might not look like the justice you imagined." The turncoat. On April 22nd, fortune shifted. Russo's lieutenant, Leo Martelli, was arrested in Reno for illegal weapons possession. Facing 20 years, Martelli flipped. In exchange for leniency, he described Russo's methods in chilling detail. Emily had been flagged after asking questions about chip exchanges. Russo ordered her handled. Grant, the security supervisor, lured her into the north elevator. She was held overnight in sub-basement C, then taken into the desert at dawn. Martelli's voice cracked as he admitted, "I wasn't there, but I heard Russo brag. He said she begged him to let her call her kid." Briggs closed his eyes, bile rising. The son's question at home. Rachel's son Daniel asked a question Briggs couldn't answer. "Is mommy coming back to watch me play baseball?" Rachel wept. Briggs knelt, forcing the words past his throat. "Your mom was very brave. She tried to do the right thing. And we're going to make sure the man who hurt her never hurts anyone again." Daniel only nodded, clutching his mitt tighter. The smirk in court when Martelli testified, Russo never lost his composure. He sat in a tailored suit, expression unreadable, only the faintest smile tugging at his lips. Briggs recognized it. The same smile Emily had described to her sister. The smile of a man who believed the house always won. A new lead, but then, something unexpected. During discovery, prosecutors uncovered sealed maintenance logs from October 2007. One entry, dated the night Emily vanished, noted, "Vehicle authorization, North Service exit, 4:12 a.m. driver, R. Vance." Briggs froze. Vance. Not Russo. Not Martelli. A different name altogether. Someone else had driven Emily into the desert. Someone they hadn't been watching. The question of Vance, "Who the hell is R. Vance?" Briggs asked, slamming the log onto Klein's desk. Klein scanned the page. "Not in Russo's crew. Not in any of our files." Briggs felt the cold grip of dread. Emily's disappearance wasn't just Russo's crime. There was another player, another shadow. And if R. Vance still walked free, the case was far from over. Spring bled into the Nevada summer, the desert air shimmering with heat waves. For Detective Alan Briggs, the investigation into Emily Hart's disappearance had spanned months, but the truth still felt incomplete. Dominic Russo sat in custody, his empire collapsing. Yet the name in the maintenance log, R. Vance, gnawed at Briggs like an unhealed wound. The ghost in the records. When Briggs and Special Agent Julia Klein dug deeper, they discovered Robert Bob Vance had been a contracted maintenance supervisor at the Silver Stallion for more than 20 years. His name never appeared on payroll. He was paid through shell companies, hidden in the casino's endless maze of bookkeeping. Vance was invisible by design. And he had vanished from Nevada weeks after Emily did. The desert cabin on May 17th, A tip from an old utility worker led investigators to a derelict cabin 40 miles from the Stallion. Inside, they found rusted tools, cigarette butts, and most chilling, a wooden chair bolted to the floor. Blood traces on the chair's arms matched Emily Hart's DNA. Pinned to the cabin wall was a faded photograph, the Silver Stallion neon horse, its lights flickering, its flank dark. Scrawled beneath it, in block letters, "The house always wins." The breakthrough FBI analysts traced Vance to rural Arizona, living under an alias. He was arrested without incident at a rundown trailer park outside Kingman. In his possession were dozens of casino employee ID badges, including Emily's. Interrogation revealed the final pieces of the puzzle. Vance had been Russo's cleaner for decades. When problems arose, employees who asked questions, dealers who saw too much, it was Vance who erased them. Emily had confronted Russo about the unmarked chip exchanges. Russo ordered silence. Vance carried it out. "She wouldn't stop," Vance muttered during his confession. "She thought the rules didn't apply to her. She smiled at me like I wasn't dangerous. I showed her." The courtroom. By June 2008, the courtroom brimmed with reporters as prosecutors unveiled the full conspiracy, Russo the orchestrator. Grant, the supervisor who lured Emily into the north elevator. Vance, the enforcer who delivered her to the desert. The ledger. The sub-basement chamber. The burned remains. It all wove together into a chilling tapestry of greed and silence. Russo maintained his smirk throughout, but Vance cracked on the stand. His monotone description of Emily's final hours silenced even the most hardened reporters. "She begged to call her son," he said flatly. "Russo told me no. So I finished it." Rachel Hart left the courtroom that day sobbing, her fists pounding against the wood rail. The verdict on July 14, 2008, Dominic Russo was convicted of racketeering, obstruction, conspiracy to commit murder, and multiple counts of witness intimidation. He was sentenced to life without parole. Robert Vance received a separate conviction for first-degree murder and was sentenced to death. Grant, the supervisor, struck a deal and testified, receiving 40 years. Aftermath: the Silver Stallion was permanently shuttered, its neon horse dismantled piece by piece. For years, the sign had galloped against the desert sky. Now it lay in rusting fragments behind a county storage lot, another relic of Las Vegas's darker history. Rachel Hart became an advocate for victims of casino-related crimes, speaking at conferences, demanding accountability. Daniel grew up knowing the truth, that his mother had died trying to do the right thing. Briggs never forgot the case. He carried Emily's journal in his desk drawer until the day he retired, its pages filled with her careful handwriting, her final warning preserved forever. The closing image in the desert where Emily's remains were found, a small memorial now stands. Flowers fade in the heat, photographs warp in the wind, but visitors still come. Some nights, truckers claim they see a flicker of red, like a dealer's vest, moving against the horizon. And always in the distance, they swear they hear the faint echo of cards being shuffled, as if Emily Hart is still dealing one last hand in the house that took her life.